I, I really don't know what someone at Conservative Home has put Will Atkinson on, but for God's sakes, take the boy off it. He's clearly having too much. Already, just a couple of weeks ago, we covered an article from him bemoaning about the fact that the Conservatives were going to lose and that Rishi Sunak had to be honest with the UK public. And his solution was to essentially say that Sunak should usher in a new age of super austerity. Now, not surprisingly, the comments we didn't cover, but I sort of wish we'd mentioned them at the time. Every single comment was incredibly negative about the article that he had written. There was not one, although that may have changed, I don't know. At the time of reading it, there was not one positive comment in support for Atkinson's decision that we should accept the fact that we've lost and, bring in super austerity. It was a bit interesting to see the Conservatives in the comments freak out about that. So that was kind of funny. And then, bizarrely, of course, the Pony Club members and the Patreon members will know that we covered this. He then went on a couple of days later to write an article saying that we really need to look for Keir Starmer's Willie Houghton. I can't remember. And essentially, this was an American case that happened a couple of years ago in an election where Bush Sr. really went after his opponent at the time. I can't remember what his name was. Basically, because he was a proponent of weekend passes, and unfortunately, this guy who got a weekend pass went out and committed murder. Now, of course, that's bad, but that doesn't really mean, or at least make the case, you should have taken away weekend passes. Maybe you should have at least been a bit more stringent about who and who cannot have those weekend passes. But this ultimately won that particular general election, and Will decided to make the case using that example that we needed to, or at least the Conservatives needed to look for the whole reason, should we say, to look for Starmer's dark secret when he was chief prosecutor, because we needed to put the fear in that that people shouldn't vote Labour. And to be honest, that was incredibly scraping the bottom of the barrel. And once again, shockingly enough, many of the comments down below were actually in agreement with me, saying that, yeah, this is incredibly barrel scrapey. Why on earth are we resorting to such bad tactics? It's not good optics for us to be really doing this. And even in his article, he brings up the numerous times that Conservatives have actually used attacks when Starmer was at the prosecutor's office to attack him on. And none of those attacks that they have tried in the past have actually worked or even stuck or, quote, spread the fear of people maybe choosing Labour. So I don't know what Atkinson has been on, but this seems to be a continuing situation where now he's written this bizarre yet fascinating article of where he is both in favor of wants to make the railway system a lot more sustainable, but at the same time seems to be against anything that would actually make the railway sustainable. And of course, he's got a bad hate boner, I can only say, against Mick Lynch. And don't get me wrong, Mick Lynch, when I think he's talking about the railways and of course trying to preserve jobs on the railway, make sure that people in the railways get a fair wage and fair living, I think he's absolutely spot on. Unfortunately, I will say in the past, when he's had comments about Ukraine, I think he has been dead wrong. But when he's talking about the railways, I think he's an absolutely fantastic champion and has been one so much. That's why he draws so much Conservative ire, because he's really, really good at expressing and getting over just how bad the railways are and why they are like that. So I think it's fair enough to say that he will, like many Conservatives, hates Mick Lynch with an absolute passion. But then Funnily enough, he brings up the fact that we, the British taxpayer, subsidise the British railways quite significantly. And we do. We pay, as British taxpayers, pay a lot into the railway system. Now, of course, we do own most of the track maintenance. That is pretty much nationalised anyway. But however, we do not own the railway companies or anything like that. And Atkinson says that this is a big disappointment to competition. And but you can't get more competition because, unfortunately, most of these railways have pretty much owned those lines and routes lock, stock, and barrel because they insisted on contracts when we privatized the railway. Which, remember, who was this done by, Will? It was done by the Conservatives. And the railways have only gotten worse. And bear in mind, I never experienced the heyday of nationalization of when we owned the railways. But I'll tell you now, it seems like a complete nirvana to the current railway system that we currently have. And we also get into the fact, he talks about how, yes, there's this big conservative case for, subsidizing the rail industry and, making it run. But I would echo the point that Mick Lynch always makes, that you see massive dividends and massive profits handed out by these railway companies to the private individuals, so that money never goes back into the system. Not only that, but there is a very, very strong case that most of this taxpayer money subsidies that we pay to the railways so that they can operate doesn't actually go to that. Instead, it goes to into the pockets of the private owners of the railway companies. So if Will Atkinson really wants to make the railways sustainable, in fact, not only just this, but I think this should be something that Labour looks into. Obviously, Keir Starmer's come out and said that they need to look at reforms, like what can they do to change stuff that doesn't really cost money, but does make systems run better and more efficient. I think that's something that Starmer is actually onto. In fact, when I was talking to the Movement Forward guy, can't remember his name, I do apologize. He said it himself. We need to look at a lot of reforms and how we can, change the system for the better. Just there's a lot of stuff we can do that won't cost us any money. So I think a big reform should be that any taxpayer subsidy does not go to be paid in dividends. And I think not the company should be sued, but I think the receiver of those dividends should then be sued if they do, or at least, should we say, asked to pay that money back. And if they don't, well, we'll come after them in the forms of other stuff, shall we say. So there is a stuff that we can do in terms of reform. But again, this is a very bizarre article written by Atkinson. And to be honest, like I say, it's one of those where I'm not going to go over it because it's just so bizarre. Yes, he starts off with praise for the railways and how much he loves the railway, and then proceeds to constantly bash Mick Lynch. Doesn't really get the arguments about closing down all these railway offices because, again, apparently we're all techie guys and we all buy our tickets to the railway office. But I'll tell you now, because I've experienced this. What if your train gets cancelled and you're there with your digital ticket and you're like, well, I don't know if I can use my ticket on another train because I might need to travel a different route. Who do I ask? Where can I find out that information? And I got stung like that once. I had to travel, do a big sort of circle round, unfortunately once, and I got stung by that because I thought I could travel like that, but no, I couldn't. So, and if I had known that, if I had maybe that information, might have been able to do something at the ticket office about that. But of course, we're closing all these ticket offices because, according to Will, it's going to make the railways more sustainable. There are better ways to make the railways more sustainable, Will. One would be certainly nationalizing the railway system, bring it back into sort of public ownership, or maybe finding ways that all that profit that gets sucked out of the railways gets instead remains in the railway system and gets actually used to improve the system. Because even he, Atkinson, has to make a admission that our railways aren't that very good at the moment, and most of it is down to privatization, which he seems to be massively in favor of and subsidizing. But when it comes to actually, making the system better, he seems to be very much against some of those proposals that would make the system run better, even if it actually says, keep them privatized. So I don't know what sort of Will's on, but he definitely appears to be on something this week. That seems to be certain. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, thank you very much for the support. Again, you guys show the channel. Like I say, please do remember to click the like and share button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and our updates link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can all buy me coffee. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.